Hey everyone! Today we're going to be learning to solve practical problems using equations. Okay, so there's many different ways that we can solve word problems. We can draw a picture, we can think through it, we could act it out or something similar. But today we're going to talk about a method where you're writing an equation from the word problem and then solving that equation to get your answer. So the first thing I want to do when I'm addressing a word problem is that I want to define my variables. And all that means is to tell me what variables you're going to be using and what those variables are going to represent in your equation. Essentially, this is going to answer the question of the problem. So let's look at our first example. One cell phone company charges $35 each month and charges $15 for every gigabyte of data that he uses. This month, one cell phone bill was $110. How many gigabytes of data did he use? So when I'm defining my variables, I really want to focus here on this part of the word problem, where the actual question is. So the question is, how many gigabytes of data? Meaning my variable should answer that question. It should be the number of gigabytes of data that he used. Okay. Now, you can pick any letter to represent this. You can pick any letter as your variable. Just be careful with letters that look like numbers, like O or a lowercase l. Doesn't really work well because then it gets confusing. Is it a 0? Is it a 1? So I like to pick something that's relevant to the content. I'm going to pick G as my variable. That'll help me remember that it represents the gigabytes that he used. Now that I've defined my variables, I can use that variable to help me write an equation based on the other information that they give me in the word problem. In my opinion, this is the hardest part of this process because it requires some careful attention to the relationships and to the information that they give you. But once you get this part down, the rest should come relatively easily. So I like to pick out the numbers. One cell phone company charges $35 each month. So for 1 month, he's paying $35. Doesn't matter how much data he uses, if he uses a ton or none at all, he has to pay $35 no matter what. And so to that, I'm going to add $15 for every gigabyte of data. So it's not always $15 here. If he uses 1 gigabyte, then it'll be $15. If he uses 2, it's going to be $30. If he uses 3, it's going to be $45. So the way that we're going to represent this in our problem is $15 times however many gigabytes he used that month. I don't know how many it is. That's why I'm going to use a variable. Okay. This month, his bill was $110. This is my total. Normally, in a question like these, you will have a total. And it helps to recognize what that total is because when I write my equation, that total is going to be all by itself on one side of the equal sign. I personally like to put my total on the right-hand side. So I'm going to do equals 110 right off the bat. My total goes alone. Then I can fill in the rest of this. The $35 that he has to pay no matter what, plus the $15 times however many gigabytes he used. Okay. Now that I've arranged that, I've got an equation that I can solve to help me answer my problem. Now, your equation may not look exactly like this one. Okay. You may put your 110 on the left side. Still alone, but it's just on a different side of the equation. That's fine. Okay. And then I've still got my $35 plus my 15 times however many gigabytes. Okay. But also remember that commutative property tells me that 35 and 15g can also switch places. So if you wrote 110 equals 15g plus 35 because you like your variable term to come first, that's fine. If you do 15g plus 35 equals 110, that's fine. Okay, so as we go through these problems and as we go through examples in class, keep in mind that your equation may not look exactly like my equation, but as long as your total is by itself, your variable is with the correct number, so in this case my G is with 15, and that I'm adding that 35 in there somewhere on the same side as my 15 and my G. As long as those things are true, all of these equations can be used. Okay, so if yours looks a little different than mine, don't panic. Okay, but make sure that those key things are happening there. So, like I just said, once I have my equation, my next step is going to be to solve that equation. Okay, so I'm going to use this equation that I wrote originally, 35 plus 15G equals 110. And I'm going to solve this the exact same way I solve a regular two-step equation. I want 15G to be alone, so I'm going to subtract 35 to get rid of it. $110 minus 35 is 75. And then I need to get G alone, so I'm going to divide by 15. G is left over. 75 divided by 15 is 5. Okay. Now, G equals 5 is a great answer. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually answer the question that my word problem asked. So my last step here, after I've solved my equation, is to actually go back and answer the question. In the context of the problem. Now, you can tell me G equals 5, but is that 5 cookies? Is that 5 puppies? Is that $5? Is it 5 days he went without cell phone service? It doesn't mean anything unless you actually put it back in context. Tell me, what does that 5 mean? So you can look at a couple different places to help you do this. Right here, you told me what G represents. G is the number of gigabytes. So G is 5, so 5 is the number of gigabytes that he used. So when I answer the question, I'm going to say 1 used 5 gigabytes of data. Okay, I'm checking to make sure that the number has meaning. 5 gigabytes. Not $5, not 5 months of service, being very clear about what that 5 actually means. Okay, let's practice that with another example. So number 2, Megan started the weekend with $32 in her wallet. She picked up a babysitting job at a rate of $12 per hour. If Megan finished the weekend with $140, how many hours did she babysit? So the first thing I want to do is figure out what my variable is going to be. To do that, I'm going to look at the question. How many hours did she babysit? Okay, so my variable should answer that question. So my variable is going to represent the number of hours. That she babysat. Okay, and again, you can pick any letter to represent this or to use as a variable. I'm going to pick H because it's a number of hours. Okay. Then I'm going to write the equation based on the information they give me in the problem. She has $32 in her wallet. So she's already starting off with $32. She picked up a babysitting job and the rate is $12 per hour. So it's going to be $12 times the number of hours that she works. Okay, I already said that I'm going to represent that with H, so I'm just going to plug that in up here next to 12. And then finally, she finished the weekend with $140, making that our total. My $140 is going to be all by itself on one side of the equal sign because it is my total. My $32 is what I started with, or what Megan started with, plus the $12 she earned for however many hours she worked. Okay. Now remember that you may see this equation represented in a couple of different ways. So if you have one of the following, your equation is still right. So you could also have 12H plus 32 equals 140. You can have 140 equals 32 plus 12H, or 140 equals 12H plus 32. Any of those is correct as long as your total is by itself. H is being multiplied by 12 because that's what the question tells me. And at some point, I'm adding in the 32, okay? Now, I'm going to solve the original equation that I wrote, which is 32 plus 12H equals 140. And if your equation looks different, that's okay. The solving process should be similar. So my 12H is my variable term. I need that alone. Minus 32 on both sides. 12H equals 108. I need to get rid of 12, so I'm going to divide, and I get H equals 9. Now, again, 9 can mean anything. 9 days, 9 weeks. Did she babysit for 9 weeks? I don't know. Okay. So I need to go back and I need to answer the question now that I know what H is. So how many hours did she babysit? Megan babysat for 9 hours. Okay, and the important part of that, of course, is the 9 hours part. Okay. Now that we've seen a couple of examples, I'm going to let you do some practice on your own. So for number 3, I'm going to read the question. I'm going to help you define the variables, and we're going to write an equation together. And then I want you to solve it and answer the question. So to send a package, the post office charges a flat rate of 67 cents per item and a fee of 42 cents per each ounce. If Dominic had to pay $3.19 to send one package, how many ounces did his package weigh? So ounces are a measure of weight. They tell how heavy something is. And so the post office is interested in charging 42 cents for every ounce that the package weighs. So let's take a look. First, I want to define my variables. So I'm going to look at the question. How many ounces did his package weigh? Remember that your variable should answer the question. How many ounces? That means that your variable should represent the number of ounces. Okay. And again, you can pick any letter to represent this. I would not use O. O looks very much like 0. It can get confusing, especially when you start plugging it in like we did up here with 12H. Okay, so instead of O, I'm just going to use X. Remember, X is always a good variable. Then I can start writing the equation. The post office charges a flat rate of 67 cents per item. So he's only sending one package, which means that that's 67 cents he's going to pay right up front. And there's a fee of 42 cents for each ounce. So 0.42 times the number of ounces, in which case I'm using that X. Okay, so I've got 0.67 plus the 0.42X. And then lastly, Dominic had to pay $3.19. This is our total. And like we talked about before, that's going to go on one side of the equal sign, $3.19. Again, your equation might look a little bit different, but you should have the total by itself. X should be with 0.42, and 0.67 should be added to that as well. Now that we've written that equation, I want you to pause the video. I want you to solve the equation to figure out the value of X, and then I want you to answer the question using that. When you finish, come back here and check your answers against my answers. All right, so when you solve the equation, you should get that X is equal to 6. If you didn't get that, go ahead and take a look at my work. And then we have to actually answer the question. 6 can mean anything, so we want to answer the question. How many ounces? Dominic's package weighed 6 ounces. Okay. In number 4, I'm going to help you define your variable, but then I want you to do the rest of it on your own. So Anna and Ben went to an apple picking orchard. They paid $3.50 for admission and $2.50 for each pound of apples that they picked. If Anna and Ben spent $16 total, how many pounds of apples did they pick? To define my variables, I'm going to look at the question. How many pounds of apples did they pick? And I'm going to make sure that my variable answers that question. So if I'm looking for how many pounds, then my variable is going to equal the number of pounds of apples. You can use any variable. I'm going to go ahead and use P to represent the number of pounds. Okay. From there, I want you to write an equation. Then I want you to come back here and check your equation against my equation. So I want you to pause, write an equation based on the information in question number 4, and then come back and check your equation with mine. All right. When you write your equation, you should get 3.50 plus 2.50p equals 16. Remember, yours might look a little different, but as long as 16 is alone, p is connected to 2.5, and somehow with the 2.5, we're adding 3.5 in, your equation is good. So now that we have that, go ahead and solve and answer the question. All right, when you solved your equation, you should have gotten that p equals 5. But remember, 5 doesn't mean anything until we actually put it in context. So we want to answer the question, how many pounds of apples did they pick? Which means that Anna and Ben picked 5 pounds of apples. Okay. For number 5, I'm going to let you do this all on your own. Go ahead and define your variables, write the equation, solve it, and answer the question. A video game streaming service site allows users to play video games for $4.50 each. They also charge a one-time subscription fee of $29. If a user paid a total of $56 this month, how many games did they play? Okay, go ahead and define your variables, write the equation, solve it, and then answer the question in context. You can pause the video here, do this on your own, and then come back and check your answers against mine. So my first step is to define my variable and what it represents. I'm looking at the question, how many games did they play? So the variable should represent the answer, the number of games. You can pick any variable. I picked G. Then I'm going to write the equation based on the information they give me in the problem. I've got my video games for $4.50 each. So $4.50 times the number of games. I have a one-time fee of $29, so that's going to be a constant, just a plain old number. And then I have my total 56. When I write my equation, my total goes on one side by itself, and then my 4.5 goes with the G, my 29 goes with that as well. If your equation is different than this, but you have all of those things, 56 is alone, G's with 4.5, and 29 is being added to that, then you're good to go. From here, I'm just going to solve. When I solve, I'm going to get G is equal to 6, and then I need to answer that question in context, which means how many games. It means that the user played 6 games. If you have any questions, be sure to write them down. We will go over them in class.